everyone, I'm Alex Sams, and this is Lady Comic Book History, where we discuss female heroes, their evolution, and their impact on comics, comic book movies, and nerd culture in general. We are being brought to you by heroic girls using science fiction and media in the fight for gender equality. Alright, so I've mentioned before that female characters in the comic book universe, both of the major ones, both Marvel and DC, that are considered overpowered are only overpowered when they are also deemed emotionally or mentally unstable. And this power always seems to come with darkness that directly implies that women being strong and powerful is evil, bad, and unnatural. Now, the most obvious examples of this are Jean Grey as any form of the Phoenix and Scarlet Witch, but there are several others. 3 is a pattern, so I've got a few bones to pick with Marvel specifically, but DC definitely is not innocent in this. And you've heard me mention it before, and you will hear me mention it again. This is just specifically, this episode is specifically talking about this horrendous trope that I hate. And it's beautiful timing because we are right smack dab in the middle of WandaVision, where they are very obviously unraveling Wanda's mind, and for all the comic book bros who want to pull the, well, that's how it was in the comics. Yeah, bud, that's the fucking problem, Kyle. It shouldn't have been a thing in the comics. You don't get to pull source material on this one. I love comic book adaptations too. I would love for them to be true to the source material as much as possible. But this ain't it, buddy. Not it. I've dealt with too many fucking Chads and Kyles who live in their mother's fucking basement wanting to fight me on this. It's a shit trope. You, first of all, don't get an opinion on the matter. It is sexist, period. That's not up for discussion. I hope that's very clear by now. This is a sexist trope, period. And it does, in fact, afflict the characters that I'm about to mention, and many more. These are just the ones I've mentioned thus far up to my research, and a couple of extras I knew off the top of my head, but there are so many more, and I'm keeping an ongoing list for you. But anyway, because I did their background a few episodes ago, why don't we start with Jean and Wanda, 2 of the most iconic cases of this ridiculous trope. Of course, we're starting with Wanda. She's the love of my life. Wanda is constantly tied to her emotional state. The so-called stability of her emotions is what has almost always dictated the state of her powers. And I have talked about this a lot, but Wanda is one of the most powerful characters in the Marvel Universe. And it's only when she is unpredictable and unstable. Even when she learned to control the parts of her that gave into chaos magic, the comic book writers continued to lean into her being more powerful when she lost control. I'm going to address another dude bro defense right now. Men are controlled by their emotions too. Male characters become more emotional. Literally, the angrier Hulk gets, the stronger he gets. Now, that's true. And I hate talking to people like they're fucking stupid. But when you say something like that to me, you've already demonstrated that you don't have the cognitive ability or the social awareness to understand the difference between those two things. And it also tells me that you have grossly ignored very important points in those storylines. When men learn how to control their abilities, they are more powerful. When men give in to their emotions and allow that anger or rage or whatever, because it's never instability, by the way. It's an emotion and it's a reaction. It enhances the powers they already have. It does not give them entirely new ones. Third, when they become more powerful, they continue to have access to that expanded version of their power, even when they are returned to a quote-unquote stable emotional state. Whereas women are either depowered completely, dead, or just have a lesser version of their powers. So, Kyle, next time you want to argue with me, you want to bring up a character that's a dude that you think this applies to, all 3 of those things better not be there. And you know why I say that? Because you can't fucking find one example of it. And that's how I know I read more comic books than you. Anyway, When women control their emotions, they do the same thing. They are less powerful. Make it make sense. Jean Grey. Oh, my poor sweet Jean Grey. The writers wanted her to be the first female cosmic hero. However, 2 of the writers on the team were against this because they felt she drew too much focus. What? We didn't have the same feelings about Wolverine, Scott, Professor X, or Magneto, but that's fine. So they decided to depower and then kill her for some reason. Their reasoning, supposedly, was because she had wiped out a planet and that she shouldn't be allowed to live because of that. Look, fair enough on the surface, but here's the thing. Hulk, Hank Pym, Tony Stark, Cyclops, 1,000 other male heroes all did even more personal and equally as unforgivable things, but they didn't get depowered or killed. In fact, they were almost all of them placed in positions of power. Fucking interesting. The writers doubled down on this after her revival, saying in retrospect the character should have stayed dead, despite the fact that no male character has ever stayed dead in the comics. It's a comic book. Everyone comes back to life. But let's act like it's different because of the circumstances of her death in that storyline. Okay, so Jean came back, and in the time that she was dead, Scott Summers got married and had a kid. And when Jean came back, Scott left his wife and daughter for Jean and Madeline. Or for Jean. And Madeline, who was Scott's new wife, dealt with this abandonment by killing her daughter, turning into a demon, and then she was killed off. I, again, try not to talk to my listeners like they're stupid, so I'm sure I don't have to tell you why that, in of itself, is sexist and problematic. Also, Scott Summers is sexist and problematic, but that's fine. And then we have the whole, she sacrificed herself to protect everyone from the Phoenix, but that's justice versus care ethics, and that's a different conversation that we'll get into in a different episode, because, I like to crush comic bros in as many ways as possible. So there's these rants, there's identifying tropes, and then I'm going to have a philosophical discussion using well-known, well-documented philosophical ideals to tell you why comic books are sexist. It's fine. You're just going to feel really bad about yourself later. I doubt comic book bros actually listen to this because I go on so many rants and the whole thing just screams feminism. But thank you for sitting through my dude bro rants. And then, of course, we have Invisible Woman as Malice. Now, even before this, Sue is called emotional by Reed Richards, and pretty much whenever she does something that irritates him, his response is, just like a woman. He claims to do things for her own good, because apparently a grown woman can't take care of herself. Then we have her leading the Fantastic Four after Reed Richards is presumed dead, and when he comes back, he's threatened as a leader because Sue did so well leading the team when he was gone, and Reed couldn't handle the fact that a woman was leading the team as well, if not better than he could. Not to mention that a grown woman went by Invisible Girl for until she had kids. There's problems in that alone, but I talked about that in the episode we did on her, so let's continue. Anyway, her short stint as Malice, which was a state she was in as a result of Psycho Man's manipulation, and to an extent his control, she had access to greater powers than she had simply as Invisible Woman. Checkpoint number 1. And once she was returned to her regular state, she ceased to have access to those powers. Checkpoint number 2. And that's the linchpin, guys. That is where the sexism rests. Allowing women to grow in their powers by using and tapping into their emotions, that's fine. But they need to be able to keep access to said powers when they return to a more stable state of mind. And they quite literally are never granted that. Not rarely, not sometimes, never has a woman hero who has gotten greater powers because of her emotional state kept those powers when deemed stable. And that is where my concern lies with WandaVision and the Scarlet Witch right now. I talked about it on Aaron's podcast, on the Temple of Geek podcast when we first started talking about WandaVision. I'm sure I will say it 100 more times on my TikTok and 100 more times on this podcast and again on his podcast when the show ends. I will not be okay with what they do with Wanda's character unless she keeps access to all the new powers we've seen her have. The extent of her reality warping, the extent of her mind control abilities, the extent of her telepathy, all of that. It fucking better stay exactly the way it is. She loses one iota of power, and I am going to lose my shit. All right, that's a great time for a short break. Okay, guys, I am here to talk to you about Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it is the easiest way to make a podcast. I had absolutely no idea where to start. I love listening to podcasts, and I knew I had a good idea for one, but I really didn't know how to get started with all the technical stuff. And Anchor makes it super, super easy. First of all, it's free, which is great when you're just starting out and you have no money to support your creative endeavors. Having free resources is amazing. And their creation tools allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your computer or your phone. They have an app that makes it super easy to record everywhere. I have an adapter for my microphone that hooks into my phone, so I can literally record my podcast wherever I am, no matter what. Anchor also does all the heavy lifting for you. They distribute your podcast so it can be heard on all of the major platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and so many more, which makes life so much easier. When there's someone handling the business distribution side of it, you get to focus on just creating, which is what I love to do. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. They handle all the sponsorship matching and everything for you. It's amazing. It's everything you need for your podcast all in one place. So if you are interested in executing your brilliant idea for a podcast, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Guys, seriously, it's the best decision you can make for your future podcast. All right, next up we have Raven. This one's going to be short and sweet because I do want to save all her background and stuff for her actual year episode, but we're just going to start off with this. The more she accessed her emotions, the more physically demonic she became. Just giving you a minute with that. I feel like that's all I really need to say about this one, but we can also point out the fact that she didn't become more human until she fell in love with Beast Boy. So once again, we have a woman who is unstable until she is tied to a man. Okay. Then we have an addition to this trope in that overpowered women are seen as bad, evil, and villainous, which is also the case with Jean Grey and Scarlet Witch. And Invisible Woman as manic. Every single woman I've mentioned so far falls into that trope as well. I don't know if that's a separate trope or the same trope, because technically Saturn Girl falls under the overpowered trope, but she doesn't really fall into the demonic trope. So I'm going to go ahead and say that it's separate tropes, and I'll give these clever names later. Check out my Facebook page. All the statistics from the representation by the numbers episode are on there in fun little infographics for you. And I'm keeping a running list of the overpowered women that fall into this trope. And I'm going to add comic book cited sources for the storylines that support that claim. And I think I'm going to do the same thing for women that fall into overpowered women that fall into the demonic trope. And support that with comic book evidence as well. I actually have a few of these I would like to do. Anyway, next up, Carol Danvers. By the time that Captain Marvel was taken over by Carol, Marvel was wanting a strong female hero to lead her own series. However, they didn't actually write her like that's what they wanted. They made her strong and independent, but somehow that meant her character wasn't likable. She made her own decisions and wasn't a pushover, so the male Avengers didn't understand her because strong women confuse men, apparently, and she wasn't stereotypically feminine, so the female Avengers didn't relate to her. She wasn't over-sexualized originally as Captain Marvel. She was as Miss Marvel. I know. So apparently male readers couldn't relate to her either, and she was character-driven. When Scarlet Witch wanted a baby, Captain Marvel literally said, "Surely you find that more fulfilling than any silly stereotype of having a baby." That being a superhero. It's not long after that Carol finds out that she's pregnant. Carol doesn't know how she got pregnant and is sure that she was violated. I put that in air quotes because that's how you sugarcoat in the actual comic. That is how they sugarcoated it in the actual comics, and I hate it. She was raped. Her son is born and is full grown a few days later, and then explains to her that she was in fact raped, but that is of course not how it's presented in the story. The writers chose to say that he used technology to seduce her, had sex with her, planted his essence into her, and then wiped her memory. Otherwise known as rape, he raped her. And we all know that my least favorite trope in any media is using sexual assault as a plot point, not only because writers never use it as a plot point for men, even though male rape is actually absolutely a problem, but it's because it's used as just another way to abuse women. One more time. I say that. I'm going to say it 50 more times. It is never, 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 ever, never, ever necessary to the story or to the character to use rape as a plot point. Never. 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 If you are about to use rape as a plot point, just know that you are a shitty writer. I hope your shit never gets made, and you go back to the drawing board and think about why you think that is necessary to do to a character. You're garbage. Do something else. It's disgusting, and if you feel that you need to put a character through being raped for any reason, and you can't seem to find an alternative to reach the same result, you are in fact a shitty writer who needs therapy and should not be allowed around people. Anyway, back to this shitty story. Carol then goes back to his home planet with him because she loves him. He raped her. That's problematic for obvious reasons, but here we go for the more subtle reasons. When creating Captain Marvel, they were going for feminist, but her character was written by men, so obviously they missed with that. She demeans other women for their life choices, not feminist. In fact, that's the exact opposite of feminist. Second of all, she very explicitly states that she does not want kids, and then the writers decided to punish her with a child, after which she abandoned everything that was important to her before her rape and the birth of her child/rapist. Like having a child and falling in love magically softened her and made her more feminine. Honestly, everything before Kelly Sue DeConnick took over was garbage. Anyway, these are a few. Oh, sorry, for the mentally unstable part. I went on a different rant. Y'all should be used to that by now. Captain Marvel. Emotionally and mentally unstable. Alcoholic. Has deep memory gaps. She blacks out quite a lot when she goes... This was more as Miss Marvel. When she went into her binary state, she could only access her binary state as Captain Marvel, she can only access her binary state in times of severe, turmoil. And then when she comes down off of it, binary is the overpowered part. When she comes down off of it, she has memory loss. She's physically exhausted. And she can't access that power again. Conditional power is also a rampant problem in female comic book characters, but we'll get to that later. Anyway, these are a few examples. They're the most major ones, but there are so many more, as I have mentioned, and as they've come up. The solution is simple. We need more women creators, writers, artists, editors. We need more women at every level of creation in comics and in film. Something I get a lot when I rant about this stuff on TikTok is men saying, well, if you don't like it, don't watch or don't read. And if you don't like it, do it yourself. Now I'm going to address both of these. First off, they're both crap, but we'll get to that. If you don't like it, don't watch or read, whatever. That one first. If women just didn't experience media that contained sexism, we would live in a cave and not absorb any entertainment at all. That's just how it is. Sexism and misogyny is so entrenched in every corner of the entertainment industry that we have to confront things while we experience media. And just because something is problematic doesn't mean you can't like it, as long as you acknowledge its problems. If you decide to remain blind to its problems because liking something problematic makes you feel guilty or offended, that's not okay. Be a grown-up, confront your biases, acknowledge problems, and you can still enjoy things. Hate J.K. Rowling. She's garbage. I will never let go of Harry Potter. I grew up with it. I love Harry Potter, but I can also see how her problematic views have seeped into Harry Potter. The writing itself is entrenched in her problematicness. That doesn't make the world less magical for me. It just allows me to see it differently. Joss Whedon, garbage human being. Buffy the Vampire Slayer saved my life, and I will never stop loving that series. Anyways, second one, if you don't like it, do it yourself. Look, this statement is reductive and tone deaf in a lot of ways. First, it grossly ignores the fact that most positions of power in the entertainment industry are still held by men. This means that the hiring decisions are still mostly made by men. Marketing decisions are mostly made by men. Production decisions are mostly made by men. And yes, there are women who have managed to fight through this. But it has been 100 times harder for them to be able to create something of value than it has ever been for men. So to tell a woman to just do it herself is super condescending, when the realistic nature of what would happen if she did write, direct, produce something herself is that it would reach very few people. You are asking women to do 25 jobs in one by themselves when men in the industry constantly have teams and money at their disposal to make their mediocre to straight horrible films and be terrible people. Michael Bay, Tarantino, Kubrick in the comic book sector, Line Wine, Mike Deodato, and about 1,000 others. They're garbage. They're not great, brilliant filmmakers. Tarantino is super problematic. So is Kubrick. So is Michael Bay in the way that they treat their actors. And Michael Bay is just a shit storyteller. So is Zack Snyder. Said what I said. And yet they get to make movies all the time. Whether they're successful or not, they get to keep making movies. Stop making it women's responsibility to fix men's shitty attitudes. You don't get to have a safe space to be a misogynistic ass. The solution is clearing out anyone with sexist ideals and hiring more women and people of color to gain different perspectives and worldviews. There is not a single man on the planet who writes women better than other women. There is not a single white dude on the planet that writes people of color better than people of color. Get it together and stop telling the underrepresented to magically take over a space they've been forced out of for decades. Okay, rant over. I can breathe now. I will see you next week, my lovelies. I'm Alexandria Sams, and for more comic book related content, check out my YouTube page as well as my vocalmedia.com. Just search my name in that creators bar. My Instagram is fangirlproductions13, and you can check out all of my work, my personal writing, articles, comic book stuff on ladycomicbookhistory.squarespace.com. This has been Lady Comic Book History, and I will talk to you guys next time.